I still remember the smell. It clung to your clothes, settled into your hair, and followed you home like a quiet promise. That warm scent of yeast and cinnamon, like the past itself, was baking in the oven. There was a little bakery on the corner of Maple and Fifth, a place where stories rose like dough, and every crack in the wood floor had a tale of its own. Everyone in the neighborhood knew DeLuca's bread and family. It wasn't just a bakery, it was a rhythm, a routine. You stopped in for a coffee and stayed for the smiles. It had stood there for almost 70 years, built by Grandpa Enzo after the war with his bare hands and a single cast-iron oven he refused to ever replace. That oven was sacred. The shop was still run by Enzo, though time had curved his back and slowed his steps. His daughter, Lucia, held things together now, a woman in her late 30s, strong in spirit but tired around the eyes. She didn't complain, not once. She didn't have the time. She raised her son, managed the shop, took care of her father, and still found the grace to slip an extra muffin into a hungry kid's bag when she thought no one was watching. And then there was Marco, Lucia's boy, 10 years old, a dreamer with flour always dusting his fingers. He'd sit by the counter doing homework, but half the time he was drawing imaginary pastries or asking Grandpa about the olden days. His favorite story was how Enzo, with no money and barely any English, slept in the bakery for 3 months on flour sacks just to keep the lights on. People say small businesses die because of poor planning or bad luck, but I watched that family pour everything into that place, every cent, every heartbeat, and we, this little corner of the world, we gave them our loyalty, not because they asked for it, but because they earned it. There were community boards on the walls, faded Polaroids of past customers, thank you cards from kids who'd now grown up and moved away. It was the kind of place where you knew you'd be missed if you didn't show up for 2 days. And one day, that piece cracked. It was a quiet Tuesday, around 4 p.m. The street was calm, bathed in golden light, the kind of afternoon that made even time itself feel sleepy. Lucia was packing up a few loaves for the homeless shelter, Marco was wiping down the tables, and Grandpa Enzo was telling a story about a regular who used to bring his dog in every Thursday. That's when the car pulled up. It didn't belong there, too sleek, too polished, too quiet. A black luxury sedan, purring like it was alive. The windows were tinted. It sat there for a while, 5, maybe 10 minutes. No one got out. No one went in. Lucia watched it through the front window, uneasy. She didn't say anything, just pulled Marco a little closer and locked the front door a bit earlier than usual that evening. We didn't know it then, but that was the first shadow. You see, sometimes evil doesn't arrive with noise or violence. Sometimes it comes quietly, with no name, no face. Just the hum of an idling engine, and eyes you can't see, watching from behind black glass. And while we went back to our bread, our smiles, our little routines, the wheels had already started turning. It came with the morning mail. At first glance, it looked like any other envelope, white, formal, printed return address, but nothing urgent. Lucia almost tossed it aside. The bakery was already in full swing, and mornings weren't exactly gentle. A fresh batch of loaves needed turning. Grandpa Enzo had burned his fingers again, refusing to wear gloves, and Marco was late for school because he refused to leave without finishing a drawing of bread-fighting evil. I kid you not. The letter sat unopened for an hour. Lucia finally tore it open while wiping flour from her hands, absent-mindedly reading as she reached for the broom. Her body froze mid-motion. Her eyes didn't leave the page, but you could see something shift in her. The color drained slowly, like someone had dimmed the room. The crumpling of the paper wasn't dramatic. It was slow, deliberate, almost gentle. And then the tears came, not loud or heavy, just a steady stream that caught Marco's attention as he walked in, lunchbox in hand. "Mum?" She couldn't even answer. The letter was an offer, on paper, generous, from a corporate firm called Lane Urban Development. They wanted to purchase the bakery property for a sum that to most would seem like salvation. But it wasn't salvation, it was a sentence, a transfer of soul for cement. Lucia didn't care how many zeros were on it. She'd been raised in this shop, slept beneath the front counter as a child while her father kneaded dough until dawn. This wasn't just her business, it was them. Every memory, every scar, every night of survival. You can't put a price on that, you shouldn't. She never even called the number on the letter. Word spread quickly. Our neighborhood had a heartbeat, and when one artery clogs, we all feel it. By lunchtime, a petition had already started, handwritten, passed from shop to shop, coffee stand to bookstore. People signed without hesitation. Some added sticky notes of support. Others wrote small memories. First date here, 1994, or your muffins helped me through my divorce. The local paper ran a small story on it, buried on page 6. It mentioned a beloved community bakery facing pressure from developers. But that was it. No outrage, no call to action. Just a quiet sigh, in ink. Then 2 weeks later, the second letter came. This time, the offer had doubled, and attached was a formal notice of potential zoning interest. That's when we realized this wasn't just a curious investor. This was a machine. And for the first time, a name was printed at the bottom: Victor Lane, CEO, Millionaire. Developer of high-end luxury projects across 3 states. To him, this place wasn't sacred, it wasn't memory, it wasn't home, it was plot A12. Lucia still said no. No amount of money would make her sign away her father's legacy. But there was a new kind of silence that crept into the bakery after that. A pause between the laughs, a nervous glance when a clipboarded man passed by the window. The flour still fell, but it didn't feel as light. And every so often at dusk a black luxury car would slow as it passed the corner of Maple and Fifth. It wouldn't stop, wouldn't honk, wouldn't roll the window down. It would just hover, watching, waiting. And the air started to feel heavier than dough. The first sign wasn't loud. It came as a notice posted quietly on the community board outside City Hall. Tucked between a flyer for guitar lessons and a missing cat poster was a single page with dry, bureaucratic language. Notice of intent to rezone, plot A12. That was our plot, the bakery, the soul of our corner, and now it was being reduced to coordinates and ink. Lucia found out about it from a customer who worked in maintenance. She sprinted 3 blocks in her apron, heart pounding, and stood in front of that notice for 10 minutes, her hands shaking. It wasn't just a warning, it was already in motion. A zoning application filed by Lane Urban Development, backed by an expensive army of attorneys. She brought it home to Enzo that night. He read it in silence, then folded it once, carefully, like a letter from a lost friend. He didn't say a word, just turned off the radio and sat at the kitchen table, eyes distant. He stayed there until the sun came up. They tried to fight it. Lucia filed an appeal, printed flyers, called local reporters, reached out to every city council member she could find. But passion doesn't pay court fees, and it certainly doesn't intimidate billionaires. Victor Lane had lawyers, a whole wall of them, smiling, polished, unshakable. At the first hearing, they objected to every sentence Lucia spoke, claimed she lacked legal standing, questioned the building's historical value. By the second hearing, she was stumbling. By the third, she could barely afford gas to drive to City Hall. And somewhere in between, Grandpa Enzo collapsed behind the counter. He had always been strong, stubbornly so, but the stress was too much. Lucia found him lying near the oven one morning, holding his chest, whispering, "Tell her not to sell." He spent the next week in the hospital, a maze of machines and quiet prayers. Marco refused to leave his side. Customers kept showing up. Donations came in envelopes, but it all felt like trying to plug a dam with thread. The zoning passed, quietly, officially, legally. Then one day, Victor showed up himself. He didn't wear a tie, just a black coat, tailored and silent. He didn't shake hands, didn't ask to come inside. He stood outside the bakery at sunset and waited. Lucia stepped out, flower on her apron, eyes fierce. "You could have sent another letter," she said. Victor looked at the sky, then the crumbling sign above the bakery door. "I thought you deserved to hear it directly." "Hear what?" "That this is happening. No more delays, no more appeals. The deal is done." Lucia laughed bitterly. "You came to deliver that in person?" Number the Y came to see what was worth so much resistance. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let him look through the window. The shop glowed in the evening light. A boy drawing cookies with superhero capes, a grandfather's coat draped over a chair, 1,000 tiny memories baked into the walls. Victor looked at it all and his face didn't change. "It's just business," he said flatly. "Emotion doesn't build cities." Then he turned and walked away. That week, the bakery lost its largest supplier. Rumors had spread that it would be gone soon. No one wanted to invest in a dying place. Lucia came home one night and found the electricity bill red-stamped. Marco asked if they'd be okay. Lucia said yes. Then she locked herself in the bathroom and sobbed into a towel. Because even a foundation of love can begin to crack under pressure no one sees coming. They didn't call it a farewell. Lucia refused to. She said it would give the fight a funeral, and she wasn't ready for that, not even after the final zoning decision came through with the city's rubber-stamped approval and the sheriff's office notified her of the scheduled demolition date. Instead, she called it Bread for All. The flyers were handwritten and taped to telephone poles. She posted one on the door of the bakery with shaking hands. Saturday, 9 a.m. One last thank you. They started baking 3 days in advance. Flour was donated. Eggs came from old friends with backyard hens. Sugar was dropped off anonymously in brown bags. Even the fancy coffee shop down the block lent their espresso machine for the day. Everyone pitched in. Enzo was too weak to stand for long, but he insisted on shaping dough. "One last time," he said. "Let my hands remember." The night before the event, Marco fell asleep at the counter, head resting on a tray of cooling biscotti. Lucia tucked a blanket over him and stayed up until 3 a.m., frosting cupcakes and whispering apologies into the silence. And then Saturday came. Hundreds showed up, not just neighbors, generations of customers. Couples who had shared first kisses there. Grown men who used to sit on the floor as kids with warm rolls in their hands. People brought instruments and played folk songs. Kids chalked bread drawings all over the sidewalk. Lucia gave away everything: loaves, muffins, biscotti, memories. Grandpa Enzo sat on a chair by the door, wrapped in a knit shawl, smiling so gently you'd think he was watching his own childhood replay in front of him. He held Marco's hand the entire time. At one point, someone handed Lucia a folded sign. She opened it and read the message written in thick black ink. "Some places feed more than hunger." She cried again, but this time she didn't hide it. And for just a few hours, the bakery was more alive than ever. Victor drove by once. He didn't stop. He didn't roll down the window. But he saw everything. Hundreds gathered around a fading little building, laughing, sharing, belonging. The kind of community you can't design with blueprints or build from cement. The next morning, demolition crews arrived at 6 a.m. Lucia didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just stood with Marco and Enzo across the street, holding hands, watching as the walls came down, brick by brick, memory by memory. The oven, Enzo's sacred heart, was the last to fall. And just before it did, he whispered something only Lucia heard. "Tell the dough. Thank you." Later that day, someone uploaded a photo. It was Enzo, wrapped in his shawl, inside the bakery just minutes before demolition, hugging the oven. His eyes were closed, his head resting gently against it like an old friend. The image went viral. People didn't know the whole story, but they felt something in that photo, something raw and human and utterly irreplaceable. By nightfall, the lot was cleared, just dirt, cold and flat. But across the internet, a storm had started. The sound of the bakery still lived in their bones. Even after the walls came down and the ovens went silent, the family would sometimes reach for things that weren't there. Lucia, catching herself looking toward the non-existent register when Marco asked for lunch money. Enzo, waking up at dawn, muscle memory dragging him toward a kitchen that no longer existed. They moved into a third-floor apartment above a pawn shop. 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, a cracked ceiling, and a window that smelled like dust every time it rained. Lucia padded together a resume, digging through old email threads and volunteer stubs, anything that might convince someone she was still valuable. But retail managers blinked when they saw she'd spent her whole life running a family bakery. She might as well have told them she knew how to churn butter by hand. No one called back. Enzo mostly stayed indoors now. His eyes had dimmed since the last loaf. He didn't speak much except to Marco, and even then his words were soft, like he was afraid they might break. Marco took it the hardest in silence. He stopped drawing for a while. His new school felt like a punishment. He told Lucia once, "It's weird, Mum, their bread smells fake." Then came the ribbon cutting. The new lot gleamed like glass, all white lines and smooth concrete, guarded by hedges that hadn't existed a week earlier. There were balloons, a podium, some shiny-eyed executive from Lane Urban Development with a fake smile and a gold scissor. Victor Lane stood to the side, arms crossed, watching. He didn't smile, didn't speak. To him, it was just a deadline met, a completed square on a spreadsheet. The ceremony wasn't for him, it was for optics, PR, but even he couldn't pretend something wasn't off. The lot stayed eerily empty. Cars passed by, but rarely turned in. It was clean, efficient, and utterly soulless. There was no life, no laughter, no stories echoing off the asphalt. Just silence. A mural, spray-painted across a red brick alley wall just 2 blocks away. Vivid, colourful, alive. It showed the old bakery, De Luca's, with its wooden sign, its flower boxes, its open door. Standing in front were Lucia, Enzo, and Marco, drawn in bold lines and warm tones, and underneath it, scrawled in dripping black paint, "You can pave over a place, but not the memories." Victor narrowed his eyes. He ordered it removed the next day. The city crew painted over it in grey. Cold, dull, final. But that night, as Victor left his high-rise and stepped into his car, he saw another one. Same style, different street. This one was smaller, just Enzo hugging his oven. The same viral photo, but reimagined in paint. This time, the quote was even simpler. "He fed us all." Victor didn't say a word, just closed the door, sat in silence as the engine purred to life, and watched the mural fade in the rearview mirror. The next morning, there were 2 more. One outside a laundromat, one near a school. And every time they disappeared, they came back, faster, bigger, sharper, like ghosts that refused to stay buried. Victor Lane had always been 2 things, efficient and untouchable. He built towers like children built with blocks, one after another, higher, sleeker, colder. His name was on the plaques of malls, condos, and airports. He dined with mayors, smiled for cameras, signed million-dollar checks without blinking. But something was off now. It started small. A shareholder raised a concern in a quarterly meeting about unusual negative press. A digital marketer flagged a growing social media trend using the hashtag #, oven still burns. Victor dismissed it. "Noise," he said. "People forget." But they didn't. The mural of the bakery he demolished, wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a movement, a symbol, It appeared on phone cases, protest signs, subway walls, even projected onto the side of one of his new developments during a silent candlelight vigil. Everywhere he went, someone seemed to recognize him for the wrong reason. And the story wouldn't die. A local journalist finally connected the dots and published an exposé titled "The Man Who Raised Memory for Concrete." The article wasn't just facts, it was surgical. It revealed that Victor Lane had grown up in a cramped apartment above a corner store in Queens, that his mother worked 12-hour days in a bakery not unlike DeLuca's, that he, once upon a time, had burned his hands pulling hot trays from ovens, that his first dollar wasn't from stocks but from sweeping crumbs off linoleum floors. The article included a single quote from a former neighbor. Victor used to cry when the bakery closed on Sundays, said the silence felt wrong. That quote burned. Victor didn't respond publicly, he never did. But behind closed doors the firm scrambled. PR consultants were hired, strategies revised. They offered donations to local food programs, scholarships in Enzo's name, even reached out to Lucia with a vague suggestion of compensation, an offer she ignored without blinking. And still, the murals spread. Victor's sleep became restless. He found himself dreaming of bread, not just the smell but the warmth of it, the steam, the comfort, the way his mother used to hum while kneading dough, her voice mixing with the rain outside. He tried to shake it off, went back to work, sat in meetings. But during one particularly tense interview for a national business magazine, the host leaned forward with a curious gleam in her eye and asked, "Do you ever think about what you've erased?" There was a long silence. Victor didn't answer. He blinked. Once. Twice. And for the first time in a decade, he didn't know what to say. That night, he returned to his penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture. The city sprawled beneath him like a game board. He stood at the glass with a drink in hand and stared out at his empire. But in the reflection, he didn't see a king. He saw a little boy covered in flour, holding a paper bag, smiling at his mother through a bakery window. A full year had passed. The lot remained empty. Sure, a few cars came and went, but mostly it sat under the sun like a forgotten stage, clean and meaningless. Even the painted white lines began to fade under weather and time. No laughter, no stories, no smell of anything but hot asphalt. Victor Lane hadn't returned since the opening, not publicly. But on an overcast morning in late fall, dressed in a plain black coat, dark sunglasses, and without his usual entourage, he came back. Alone. He parked 2 blocks away, walked slowly. No one recognized him, no cameras followed. When he reached the corner of Maple and Fifth, the corner that used to hum with life, he stopped. There was a small wooden stand, hand-painted, slightly crooked. It sat at the edge of the lot, right where the bakery's door used to be. A simple sign read, "Holding a tray with fresh cookies still steaming through the cool morning air." Victor didn't say anything. He just stepped closer, his shadow falling across the table. Marco looked up, smiled, and held one out. "Try the oatmeal, Grandpa's recipe." Victor reached into his coat, pulled out a $1, and exchanged it in silence. He held the cookie in his hand like it might crumble under the weight of memory. But before he could turn away, Marco spoke again. "Want to know the secret?" Victor hesitated, didn't speak, didn't nod, just looked at the boy. Marco leaned in like it was sacred. He said, "Never rush the dough. Good things take time." Victor blinked, once, twice. Then he walked away, cookie still warm in his hand, heart heavier than ever. He didn't speak to anyone that day, didn't take meetings, didn't answer his phone. He sat in his penthouse as the sun sank behind the skyline, watching the light turn the glass gold. And then he saw it. On the inside of his office window, someone had left a sticker. A copy of the mural, the bakery, the family. And in the corner, a single phrase in small white letters. "The oven still burns." Victor didn't call security, didn't remove it, didn't look away. For the first time in a long time, he just sat and let it hurt.